The palace of Salarth was a fortress of light, all silver angles and humming crystal spires that sang with the energy of the alien star beyond its shields. To the humans standing within its vast council hall, the air itself felt alive, shimmering like heated glass, thick with the scent of minerals and ozone. Captain Eli Ward, still streaked with the dust of battle and the blood of comrades, stood beneath those alien arches, every muscle in his body coiled between exhaustion and disbelief. Around him, the tall, blue-skinned envoys of the Volari Empire watched in utter silence, their white eyes glinting like carved frost. And at the far end of the hall stood the queen herself, taller than any of them, crowned in living metal that pulsed faintly with her heartbeat. Her name was Sarithan. Every syllable carried inhuman weight, as if the sound of it had been engineered to rule. When she spoke, her voice vibrated not just in air but in bone. "Your species has brought only fire," she said, her gaze cutting through Eli like a blade of cold light. "You burn what you do not understand, and you claim it is peace." Her words were a verdict, not a statement, and the chamber's energy flared in response. Eli's pulse pounded in his ears. He wanted to speak, to say something that might matter. But what could a soldier say to a queen of the stars who had already decided humanity was a contagion? The other humans behind him, scientists, diplomats, medics, stood as still as statues. A child whimpered softly in the crook of Eli's arm, and that sound felt louder than any weapon. Her name was Anya, the daughter of an ambassador who hadn't survived the bombardment of Triskar, and somehow Eli had become her guardian during the retreat. She pressed her tiny face into his torn uniform, trembling, unaware of the galaxy hanging on the next few breaths. The alien queen's eyes flicked toward the movement, the faintest narrowing of interest, but her voice did not soften. "You will return to your dying world," she said. "There will be no accord. The Volari have decided." Eli's mouth was dry as desert glass. He could see the bodies behind his eyelids, the friends who hadn't made it off the shuttle, the civilians who had burned in the crossfire. Every story he'd ever heard about first contact was wrong. Peace wasn't born from understanding, it was born from exhaustion. "Your Majesty," he forced out, his voice cracking like ice under strain. "We came here to stop this war before it devours us both." The queen tilted her head, slow and almost feline. "You came because you feared extinction. That is not peace, human. That is survival." The hall glowed brighter, her words echoed by the living crystal, and Eli felt as if the building itself was judging him. Anya stirred again, her small fingers clutching at his shoulder. Eli lowered his eyes, whispering something soft. Just a lullaby, the kind his mother used to hum after storms back home. It was instinct, not diplomacy, a sound that didn't belong in this alien court of power. But as he whispered, the child shifted and reached outward. Before Eli could stop her, she extended her arms toward the towering queen, innocent, trembling, utterly unafraid. The room seemed to freeze. Sarathan's guards tensed, their crystalline armor flaring, but the queen herself simply stared, her expression unreadable. The child's fingers brushed air and stopped halfway, waiting. It was an impossible moment, a human child offering affection to the ruler who had just condemned her kind. And yet, something in that small, trembling gesture pierced the shimmering wall of ceremony. Sarithan stepped forward, every movement like a storm gathering shape. Her eyes narrowed, but not in anger. There was confusion there, a flicker of something long buried. Eli didn't breathe. His instincts screamed to pull the child back, to protect her, but something deeper told him to wait. The queen's hand, gloved in the metallic sheen of her symbiotic armor, lifted slowly, hesitating midair. The guard's weapons hummed, ready to strike, but she waved them off with the barest flick of her fingers. For the first time, Eli saw her face soften. It wasn't human tenderness, it was curiosity, maybe even pain. "Why does she not fear?" Sarithan murmured, almost to herself. Eli swallowed hard. "Because she doesn't know what fear is supposed to look like." The queen looked from the child to the soldier, her expression shifting through emotions too complex for human names. The light in the room dimmed as if the palace itself were holding its breath. When Sari then finally spoke again, her tone had changed. "You hold a strange power, human," she said quietly. "Not of weapons or fleets. Of something older." The guards relaxed fractionally, uncertain. Eli didn't understand her words, not really, but he saw the tiniest fracture in the queen's certainty, and it was enough. The child, emboldened by the lack of resistance, leaned forward again, arms wide. This time, Sari then did not retreat. Her hand extended, and the alien metal of her armor melted away into pale blue skin that shimmered like the edge of twilight. Her fingers brushed the child's hair, hesitant, almost reverent. The silence broke into a collective exhale from everyone present. For the first time in recorded human history, an alien sovereign touched a human not as an enemy, but as something she didn't yet have a word for. Eli felt his throat tighten. The queen's eyes met his again, and something unspoken passed between them. A question neither of them could voice. Could this fragile, impossible gesture mean something beyond the walls of this room? Or would it vanish in the weight of politics and pride once they stepped away? He didn't know. All he knew was that for the first time since the war began, the sound of weapons seemed far away. The queen's voice dropped to a whisper. "Take her," she said, her gaze on the child. "Keep her safe. If you can protect what is innocent, perhaps there is something in your kind worth saving after all." And though no treaty was signed that day, the moment was recorded in every mind present, not as an end, but as the first quiet tremor of change. Eli didn't remember leaving the hall. His legs had moved before his thoughts had caught up, carrying Anya and his aching disbelief through corridors of light that hummed with a pulse not unlike a heartbeat. The Volari architecture seemed alive, every surface whispering with bioluminescent veins that dimmed as he passed, as if measuring and acknowledging the human presence within. The council behind them dissolved into hushed murmurs, some awed, some furious, but the queen's command held absolute. Guards with skin like silver glass escorted them to a guest chamber carved into the side of the citadel, overlooking the planet's endless ocean of clouds. It was a place designed for containment, not comfort. Yet there was something solemn in the way it enclosed him, like a cathedral of silence suspended in air. Anya slept now, her small hand still wrapped around the fabric of his torn sleeve. Eli sat near the transparent wall, staring at the storm currents far below. He replayed every second of what had happened. The child's outstretched arms, the queen's hesitation, the touch that should have never happened. He felt the phantom echo of that moment, the stillness before understanding cracks open into something irreversible. Old power, she had called it. What had she seen in them, in him? He wanted to believe it was hope, but that word felt too fragile for this world. Somewhere beyond the storm horizon, human fleets still waited in orbit, expecting either victory or annihilation. No one had told them that peace had flickered here, for the length of a heartbeat. A soft hum interrupted his thoughts. The door rippled open, not sliding, but folding like water-bending light. A tall figure entered, robes of pale circuitry flowing around him. He was Volari too, but older, his features edged with wisdom rather than command. "Captain Ward," the alien said, inclining his head slightly. His voice carried the same harmonic resonance as the queen's, but gentler, almost kind. "I am Kalesith, Minister of Translation. The queen requests your presence at first light." Eli's brow furrowed. "She's changed her mind?" Kalesith's eyes glowed faintly. "She is reconsidering. You are not to leave this room until summoned. The child will remain with you." Eli nodded slowly. "You're afraid I'll run?" "No," the alien said with something like a smile. "We are afraid you will succeed." When Kalesith departed, the door sealed with a sigh, leaving Eli in the soft blue twilight. He leaned back against the wall, exhaustion closing around him like water. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something sweet, like rain on stone. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of the war. The endless broadcasts of losses, the hollow promises of strategy, the ache of surviving when others hadn't. He thought of home, of green fields drowned in ash, of the quiet mornings before the first orbital strike. He hadn't joined the war to be a hero. He joined because someone had to protect the ones who couldn't fight back. Looking at Anya's sleeping face, streaked with the residue of tears and soot, he knew that reason still held. Hours passed. The alien city dimmed into its night cycle, lights cooling to softer tones that painted the walls with drifting constellations. Eli couldn't tell if he slept or just drifted into the edges of it. When he woke, it wasn't the sound of guards or engines that stirred him. It was a whisper, faint but real. Human. The word shivered across the room like a current. He turned. The queen stood near the threshold, her armor dimmed to a softer luster, her silver hair braided in intricate spirals that caught the starlight. No guards followed her. She looked smaller now, less a force of nature and more a being of impossible presence caught in her own uncertainty. Eli rose carefully, not wanting to wake the child. "Your Majesty," he began, but she raised a hand. "Do not use titles here," she said, her voice softer than before. "In this place, I am only Sarithan." The name felt different without the weight of the throne. She stepped closer, eyes tracing the sleeping child before meeting his. "Our histories are carved in blood," she said. "For cycles uncounted, the Volari have fought only to preserve what remains of our world. Yet your kind arrives, fierce and reckless, with no understanding of what you destroy, and no understanding of what you awaken." Her gaze hardened briefly. "Do you know what I saw when your child touched me?" Eli shook his head. "I saw memory," she whispered. "A memory not my own. Of soil, wind, laughter. Of a mother's voice. Your kind, you carry echoes in your flesh." He didn't know what to say. There was something sacred in her tone, like someone standing before a truth too vast to name. "We call that being human," he said finally. "We remember through feeling." Sarithan studied him for a long moment, her luminous eyes reflecting the stars below. "Perhaps that is your strength. You do not forget pain, even when it devours you. My people call such memory a flaw." She turned, her silhouette framed by the stormlight. "Tomorrow, I must face the High Conclave. They demand I end negotiations. But I have seen what they have not. Your child reminded me that life still chooses hope, even when reason does not." Eli's heart pounded. "Then there's still a chance." She looked back at him, and for the first time he saw fear, not of battle but of loss. "There is always a chance," she said. "But peace demands a sacrifice greater than war." When she left, the room felt heavier, as if the air itself carried her uncertainty. Eli watched the clouds below swirl into luminous vortices, silent storms reflecting the turmoil within him. He didn't know what kind of sacrifice she meant, but he understood that the next sunrise would decide not just their fates, but the story of two civilizations. He sat beside the child again, tracing the faint outline of a scar on his wrist, a reminder of battles he'd thought would end him. Anya stirred, mumbling in her sleep, and he whispered back, "It's going to be okay." He wasn't sure if he believed it, but he needed her to dream as if he did. Outside, dawn crept across Salarth in waves of radiant gold refracted through the clouds. The palace awoke with its symphonic hum, and before the light reached its zenith, the door opened once more. Kaelsith entered silently, his expression unreadable. "The queen awaits," he said. Eli glanced at Anya, still sleeping peacefully. "She stays," he insisted. Kaelsith inclined his head. "She is under the queen's protection now. None will harm her." Eli followed him through the luminous halls, every step echoing with the weight of destiny disguised as duty. They reached the grand convocation chamber, larger than any cathedral, its walls alive with shifting constellations drawn from memory and light. Sarithan stood at the center, surrounded by the conclave, 7 towering Volari elders whose faces were etched into the legends of their kind. Their eyes burned with cold fire as Eli entered. One of them hissed softly, "You bring the human here, Majesty?" Sarithan's gaze never left Eli. "He is the reason we reconsider. He is proof that life finds mercy even in ruin." The elder's tone cut like ice. Or infection finds its host. The hall darkened, the biolights dimming in sync with their anger. Sarathon's jaw tightened, but she held her ground. Enough, she commanded. If we destroy them, we destroy what remains of ourselves. And in that instant, Eli realized what her sacrifice might mean, what she was preparing to risk to defy her own people for the smallest spark of hope. The storm that raged beyond the citadel mirrored the tempest within the chamber. Lightning crawled through the high clouds like veins of molten glass, briefly illuminating the alien elders' faces in shards of silver light. The conclave's disapproval pressed down like gravity itself, ancient and suffocating. Sarathon stood tall among them, though Eli could see the tremor beneath her composure, the impossible strain of one ruler standing against the oldest laws of her kind. Kaelsith stood near the edge of the dais, translating each exchange through the neural resonance link that pulsed faintly between their temples. Eli didn't understand the language of the Volari fully, but he didn't need to. Rage and disbelief transcended words. He could feel it in the pitch of their harmonics. The human is a weapon, one elder declared, her voice vibrating through the crystalline walls. His kind brought ruin to the Lan Prime. They carved their victory from the ashes of what we once called sacred. Another struck his staff to the ground, the sound ringing like a bell forged from thunder. To show mercy to predators is to invite extinction. The council chamber grew colder, light dimming as the palace itself seemed to withdraw. Sarathon met their accusations with the stillness of a glacier. Perhaps extinction is preferable to becoming what we claim to despise, she replied. They fight because they fear, and fear is not foreign to us. It is the root of every war we've waged. Her words hung in the air, daring anyone to speak against her. Eli watched the scene unfold in silence, his pulse racing. He felt out of place, a single heartbeat amid the machinery of empires. Every instinct told him to stay quiet, yet the sight of her standing alone ignited something defiant inside him. The queen risked everything, her throne, her life, for a belief that humanity might be worth understanding. He couldn't let her stand alone. If you're going to judge my species, he said, his voice carrying farther than he expected, then judge all of it. The wars, yes, the violence, but also the hands that rebuild after, the voices that keep talking when no one's listening. You call us dangerous, but maybe it's because we remind you of what you used to be. The hall erupted into overlapping harmonics of shock, 1,000 tones colliding like shattered glass. Kaelsith's eyes widened, but Sarathon didn't silence him. Instead, she looked almost proud. One elder moved forward, his skin gleaming like obsidian. Human words mean little. Show us something we can believe. Eli's jaw tightened. What do you want me to show? I'm just a soldier. Sarathon's gaze met his, steady and searching. Then show them what drives you, she said softly. The core that keeps your kind standing when logic says you should fall. Her voice trembled with something personal, something only he could hear. The conclave began a low chant, an ancient cadence that made the walls thrum. A circle of light expanded around Eli's feet, the air charged with static and alien resonance. Kaelsith looked uneasy. They will test you, he warned. In their way. The floor shifted beneath him, and suddenly he was no longer standing in the chamber, but in a world of fractured visions. The sky was split between stars and flame. Human soldiers ran beside alien warriors, their faces blurring into echoes of memory. Every sound felt too close, every emotion too raw. The conclave had pulled him into a psychic simulation, an ancient Volari rite of truth where thought became substance. He could feel their presence in the storm, judging not his words but the architecture of his soul. He saw himself on Triskar again, holding Anya beneath the collapsing spires, the smell of smoke in his lungs, the roar of ships overhead. Fear clawed at him, but he did not run. He remembered staying, shielding her, because running would have meant leaving her to die. That, Sarathon's voice whispered through the storm, is what they must see. The storm shifted, replaying the moment from another angle. Now he saw it as the Volari did, through eyes that read emotion as color and sound. His fear was crimson, his pain a storm of fractured silver, but his resolve burned white, steady and blinding. The elders murmured within the current, voices like stone grinding against time. He endures, one said. He protects what is not his own. Another's tone softened. And he does not ask what he gains. The visions bled away, and Eli fell to his knees on the crystalline floor, breath ragged. Sarathan was there before him, hand extended, not as a queen to a subject, but as one survivor to another. He took it without thinking, and for the first time she smiled. The conclave's silence was absolute. Then, one by one, the elders dimmed their light, a gesture of concession. But not all agreed. The eldest among them, his eyes burning with ancient fury, struck his staff again. Mercy is weakness, he thundered. If we let them live, we will forget who we are. The words cracked through the chamber like a weapon. Sarathan's expression hardened. Then perhaps who we are deserves to change. The elder's power flared, a burst of energy like a small sun igniting in his chest. Kalesith shouted a warning. Eli moved instinctively, pulling the queen down as the blast tore through the air, shattering the dais and sending shards of crystal screaming through the hall. The concussion hurled him backward, his armor fracturing, pain blooming bright behind his eyes. When he opened them again, the chamber was chaos. Guards rushed in, weapons drawn, as energy storms danced across the broken floor. The attacking elder had collapsed, consumed by his own power, but the damage was done. The conclave was fractured, the fragile thread of negotiation severed. Sarathan struggled to rise, blood, a shimmering silver hue, dripping down her temple. You should not have interfered, she whispered. Eli grimaced, forcing himself upright. You'd be dead if I hadn't. Her eyes met his, sharp even through pain. Perhaps that is what peace required. He shook his head. No. Peace doesn't need martyrs. It needs people willing to survive it. Kalesith appeared beside them, scanning the wreckage. The conclave will call this treason, he said. You both must leave before the purge begins. Sarathan hesitated, torn between duty and instinct. Eli could see the war inside her, the ruler bound by history versus the woman who had seen a child's touch undo hatred. Finally, she nodded. Then we run, she said, her voice steel and sorrow entwined. Kalesith pressed a small device into her hand, its light pulsing faintly. This will lead you to the outer rings. Beyond that, you are on your own. She met his gaze with gratitude and grief. You have always believed too much, Kalesith. He smiled faintly. Someone had to. The halls of the citadel blazed with alarms as they fled, echoes of alien language ricocheting through corridors of living glass. Eli's vision blurred, but adrenaline kept him moving. Sarathan led the way, her armor reshaping around her with each stride, a living second skin. When they burst into the outer corridors, the view opened to the endless stormscape beyond. There! She shouted, pointing to an aerial platform that shimmered like a fragment of dawn. They sprinted across the bridge as energy blasts erupted around them, slicing through the air. The queen moved like lightning, grace and fury fused into one. Eli covered her flank, his rifle useless against their shields but his courage unyielding. When they finally reached the platform, a sleek vessel awaited, organic in shape, its surface pulsing with light. This ship is unregistered, Sarathan said, breathless. If we can reach orbit, the humans will sense its energy signature. Eli climbed aboard, helping her in. Then let's hope they're listening. The platform trembled as the first wave of royal guards appeared at the far end, weapons raised. Sarathan looked back one last time at the city she had ruled, its towers glowing like dying stars, and whispered something Eli couldn't hear. Then she sealed the hatch, and the vessel surged upward into the storm, chased by the thunder of betrayal. The storm swallowed them whole. The escape craft plunged through churning clouds so dense they glowed from the inside, a living sea of light and fury. Thunder cracked in spirals, and streams of plasma bled across the hull in curtains of violet flame. Eli strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat, muscles taut as the vessel bucked violently. Sari then stood at the helm, her hands splayed against the living console that pulsed under her touch. The ship responded like a creature sensing its master's fear, moaning, shuddering, straining toward freedom. The view beyond the canopy was madness. Lightning chasing their wake, gravity twisting the horizon into impossible arcs. "We're not going to make it," Eli gritted out through clenched teeth. Sari then didn't look at him. "We are past certainty," she said, "but not past choice." For several minutes, there was nothing but the storm's roar and the rhythmic thrum of the ship's heartbeat. Then the clouds thinned, and stars emerged, distant, cold, infinite. The moment they broke through, alarms wailed in alien tones. Sarathan's jaw tightened. "They've activated pursuit." Eli squinted at the holographic array forming midair. A cluster of Volari interceptors appeared behind them, sharp as daggers of light, closing fast. "They're not giving up," he said. "They can't," she answered. "I have defied the conclave. To them, peace is rebellion." She turned her gaze toward him, steady despite the chaos. "If we are captured, they will execute you first. The act will make my death easier to justify." Eli forced a grim smile. "Then we just don't get caught." He moved toward the navigation array, hands tracing alien symbols. "Which of these actually controls thrust?" he muttered. Sari then reached past him, her touch sure and fluid, and the ship lurched as plasma engines ignited fully. "Follow my rhythm," she said. "Think of the ship as alive. It listens." He tried, and for a moment the resistance lessened. The craft curved between electromagnetic currents like a dancer between waves. Behind them, interceptors fired lances of ionized energy that sliced the void into jagged patterns. One shot grazed their wing, spinning the ship sideways. Alarms screamed, lights flickered, but Sari then held her stance. "Hold," she commanded, and the ship obeyed, stabilizing as if anchored by her will alone. Eli stared at her. How her skin seemed to glow brighter with every surge of power. How her eyes burned with determination that felt utterly human in its defiance. The interceptors regrouped, forming a pincer formation. "They'll trap us in the gravity well," Eli said. "Not if I break it first." Sarathan's hands shifted patterns on the console, and the ship's hull rippled like liquid metal. "What are you doing?" "Changing the ship's frequency," she replied. "It will cease to exist for a heartbeat." Eli blinked. "That sounds like a terrible plan." She smiled faintly. "Then it suits us both." A blinding pulse erupted, reality folding inward for an instant, and the universe vanished. When sight returned, they were beyond the enemy formation, drifting in the quiet vacuum between stars. The interceptors spun helplessly in empty coordinates, chasing ghosts. Eli exhaled shakily. "Remind me never to call you reckless again." Sarathan's lips curved. "Then I would have nothing left to prove." They drifted in silence for a time, engines cooling to a low hum. Beyond the canopy, a faint blue shimmer marked the edge of the human fleet's detection perimeter. Home was somewhere past that barrier, but Eli felt the weight of distance heavier than any galaxy could measure. "You risked everything," he said quietly. "Why?" Sari then didn't answer at first. Her gaze lingered on the stars, and when she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "Because your child showed me what my people have forgotten. We were not always conquerors. Once we built gardens that sang and oceans that dreamed. But power devoured memory, and fear replaced wonder." She looked at him then, eyes bright with unshed silver light. "Your kind still remembers wonder, even when surrounded by ruin. I wanted to believe that memory could save us." Eli leaned back, the exhaustion of survival settling into his bones. "Maybe that's what makes us human," he said. "We keep hoping even when hope looks stupid." She tilted her head, curious. "Stupid? It means we hope because we have to, not because it makes sense." Sari then considered that for a long moment, and then, softly, almost imperceptibly, she laughed. It was a sound like the breaking of glass in sunlight, strange and beautiful. Then perhaps stupidity is divine. Before he could answer, the console flared red. Kaelsitha's voice crackled through the comlink, distorted by interference. Majesty, you must turn back. The Conclave has issued the Rapture Protocol. They will annihilate the atmosphere rather than let the humans survive. The words hit like a blow. Eli's heart stuttered. They'd destroy their own world? To erase the failure of mercy, Sari then whispered, her face paling. They mean to purge it all. There was no hesitation in her movements. She redirected the ship, engines roaring to full power. We return to Solarth, she declared. Eli grabbed her arm. That's suicide. She met his eyes, steady and unflinching. It is consequence. He saw then that she had made peace with the cost long before this moment. But he hadn't. You're not doing this alone, he said. She opened her mouth to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. For a heartbeat, silence bridged the unbridgeable distance between species, between duty and choice. Then she nodded once, slow and solemn. Then we go together. As they descended once more through the layers of storm and light, Solarth burned beneath them. The Rapture Protocol had begun, the planet's ionosphere tearing itself apart in arcs of golden fire. Towers that once glowed with serene intelligence now shattered into molten rain. They're unraveling the core grid, Sari then said, gripping the controls. We must reach the Heartspire before it collapses. The Heartspire, Eli remembered that name from the briefings. The living engine that powered the Volari world, pulsing with the memories of generations. If destroyed, the entire biosphere would die. How do we stop it? He shouted over the rising noise. With something they cannot calculate, she said. Faith. The ship tore through the atmosphere, its hull screaming against the pressure. When it broke through the final cloud layer, the capital lay below in ruin. A city of light devoured by its own brilliance. Energy storms ripped through its avenues, turning monuments into rivers of molten glass. They landed hard on the Citadel's upper platform, the impact jarring every bone in Eli's body. The ramp opened, and heat slammed into them like a living thing. Stay behind me, Sari then ordered, drawing the symbiotic armor around her again. But Eli was already moving beside her. Not a chance. They ran through the collapsing corridors, the floor vibrating with each pulse of the dying core. Fragments of crystal fell like rain, catching the glow of the destruction in haunting beauty. When they reached the Heartspire chamber, the sight froze him. The vast column of light that once pulsed steady now convulsed wildly, its energy fracturing into chaotic waves. At its base stood the remaining elders, their forms flickering between matter and energy as they channeled their life force into the collapse. You cannot stop us, Sari then. One hissed, voice breaking. Peace was the disease. This is the cure. She stepped forward, fury radiating like light from her skin. No, she said, her voice rising into the storm. This is despair. The air itself trembled as she unleashed her power, the living armor flaring to life. Energy clashed in brilliant streams. Blue against gold, hope against vengeance. Eli dove for cover, shielding his face from the surge. The explosion of force shattered the upper spire, sending debris into orbit. He crawled toward her through the chaos, shouting her name, but the noise drowned everything. Then he saw her, kneeling at the core, hands pressed to the Heartspire's surface, light pouring through her like a river of stars. What are you doing? He yelled. Her voice came faintly, raw and trembling. The spire stores memory. I can rewrite the command, but it will take everything. You'll die, he shouted. She smiled through the blinding light. Then I will die remembering. Without thinking, Eli reached her, placing his hands over hers, ignoring the searing pain as the energy burned into his skin. You said faith, he whispered. Then let's make them believe. Together they pushed, human will and alien consciousness intertwining, rewriting destruction into renewal. Light erupted, swallowing the chamber whole. The shockwave rippled outward, silencing the storm. When the brilliance faded, the Heartspire glowed steady once more, its song no longer violent but mournful and alive. The elders were gone, consumed by their own defiance. Eli collapsed beside Sari then, her body motionless, her pulse fading beneath skin that shimmered like fading starlight. "No," he whispered, shaking her shoulders. "Don't you dare." Her eyelids fluttered, her voice barely a breath. "You were right, human. Peace does not need martyrs." Her fingers brushed his cheek, leaving a trail of light. "It needs those who stay." Then her hand fell still, and the heart spire sang her farewell in tones the world would never forget. Eli knelt beside her, surrounded by the quiet ruin of what had been both a world and a war. The storm outside began to clear. For the first time since he'd set foot on Solarth, he could see the true sky, soft, endless, filled with the promise of beginning again. The sky above Solarth turned from gold to silver as dawn touched the wounded planet, casting long reflections across the broken towers of the once living city. Smoke drifted like spectral rivers through the valleys of glass, carrying with it the scent of ozone and dust. The war was over, though no one had declared it. The heart spire pulsed steadily at the center of the ruins, no longer the engine of domination but a slow-beating heart, whispering to the clouds. Eli Ward stood among the remnants, the ash of his uniform dark against the faint shimmer of alien light that still lingered on his skin. His hands bore the scars of what he and Sari then had done, thin white marks that pulsed faintly with energy when he touched the air. The Volari who had survived watched from a distance, uncertain whether to fear him or thank him. He had buried her at dawn beneath the roots of the heart spire. The ground there hummed with residual power, and when he pressed his palms into the soil, he felt warmth instead of cold. It was said the Volari returned to the light when they died, their essence absorbed by the great memory lattice beneath the surface. As he watched, faint trails of luminescence seeped upward from where she lay, merging with the air like mist rising from water. It looked like peace taking shape. Kale Sith approached quietly, his robe tattered, one arm bound in crystalline fiber. "She is not gone," the minister said softly. "The spire remembers. Her thoughts will live within its harmonics, guiding those who listen." Eli didn't look up. "She deserved more than memory." Kale Sith smiled sadly. "Perhaps, but she gave your species something memory cannot erase, a chance to be believed." Beyond them, the human fleet descended through the atmosphere, cautious and broken from the long silence of waiting. The sky filled with the silver wings of rescue shuttles, their lights reflecting off the crystal plains. Anya was among the first to arrive, clutching a blanket too large for her small frame. When she saw Eli, she ran across the ash without hesitation, her feet leaving faint glowing footprints where they touched the ground. He knelt to catch her, holding her close, feeling the tremor of life against the hollow weight in his chest. "She's gone?" the child asked, her voice trembling. He nodded, unable to speak. Anya looked toward the heart spire, its rhythmic glow mirrored in her wide eyes. "Then she's home," she whispered, and somehow the words made sense in a way logic couldn't. The Volari gathered near the ruined council hall. Their surviving elders, humbled and dimmed, met with the arriving human envoys under a sky that still bled faint lightning. It was not a treaty signing, nor a surrender, just a conversation. Eli stood at the periphery, listening as Kale Sith translated both tongues, weaving sentences of reconciliation from the raw edges of loss. "We cannot undo the blood between us," one Volari said, "but perhaps we can learn to remember it differently." The human ambassador nodded. "Peace is not forgetting," she replied. "It's choosing what we carry forward." In that fragile exchange, something shifted. Not triumph, not forgiveness, just the smallest motion of history bending toward grace. As the sun climbed higher, the heart spire began to sing again, its tones carrying across the valley like a hymn. The sound drew everyone's gaze upward, toward the translucent apex of the spire, where light refracted into gentle patterns. And there, shimmering faintly within the glow, was her silhouette. Sarathan's form appeared not as a ghost but as a projection of the memory she had woven into the spire's lattice. She stood among the radiance, her voice clear and resonant, neither living nor gone. Children of Salarth, she said, her tone softer than the day she'd ruled. Once I believed peace was surrender. I was wrong. Peace is endurance. It is choosing to listen when every instinct demands silence. Her eyes turned toward Eli and Anya, and for a heartbeat, the image seemed to smile. Carry this forward. Remember that even in fear, compassion can rewrite the stars. The image faded, leaving only light, but the echo of her words lingered like warmth after a storm. Eli felt something ease inside him, a release of tension he hadn't realized he'd carried since Earth's first contact with the Volari. He stood beside Anya, who reached for his hand without looking up. Together they watched the light pulse in quiet rhythm, a reminder that both grief and hope could share the same heartbeat. She saved them, Anya said. Eli nodded. She saved us all. Around them, humans and Volari began clearing the wreckage, rebuilding not from command but from understanding. Soldiers laid down weapons beside alien engineers, and in the mingling of their shadows, a new kind of dawn began to take shape. Days turned to weeks as the alliance took root. The Volari taught humans to read the resonance of living structures, while the humans showed them the fragile art of rebuilding communities with laughter and shared meals instead of orders. Eli found himself drawn into both worlds, his hybrid scars marking him as something between them. He became a bridge without meaning to be, half soldier, half envoy, carrying the weight of what Sarathan had begun. Kaelsith once told him that the Heartspire responded differently when he approached, humming faintly in tones no Volari could replicate. It recognizes your imprint, the minister said. Perhaps you are part of it now. Eli only smiled faintly. Maybe that's her way of making sure I don't screw this up. But at night, when the rebuilt lights of Salarth flickered against the storm clouds, he would walk alone to the Heartspire's base. The wind there carried whispers, snatches of the Queen's voice folded into the harmonic field. He could almost imagine her standing beside him, watching as the city healed. Sometimes, when the stars aligned just right, the Heartspire shimmered with the faint outline of a mother and child, her and her daughter, reunited in memory. And in those moments, Eli understood the quiet truth of what they had both fought for, that humanity's greatest weapon had never been strength or fire or conquest. It was the stubborn, reckless capacity to care even when the universe insisted it was futile. Years later, Salarth would become the first joint capital of the United Concord, the fragile alliance between human and Volari worlds. At its heart stood a statue of light depicting a queen and a soldier standing side by side, their hands joined over a small child reaching toward the sky. Beneath the sculpture, an inscription carved in both languages read, "Peace is not granted. It is built one act of mercy at a time." Visitors said that at night, when the wind passed through the crystalline streets, the statue seemed to sing faintly, a song that carried the same melody as the Heartspire's pulse. Some believed it was only the breeze. Others swore it was Sarathan's laughter woven into the air. Eli never left Salarth. He became a teacher of sorts, helping shape the next generation of envoys and explorers. Anya grew under his care, her curiosity boundless, her questions endless. Sometimes, when she stared at the stars, she would ask, "Do you think they're watching us?" And he would smile. "If they are, I hope they're proud." Life returned to the planet slowly, tenderly, as though afraid to disturb the memory of what had been lost. But among the glass gardens and silver fields, humanity and the Volari learned to live with the memory instead of running from it. That was the true legacy Sarathan left behind, a world remade not by power, but by the decision to reach across fear and find something human on the other side. On the anniversary of the Rapture's end, the Heartspire's light flared brighter than ever before. The city gathered in silence as its hum deepened into a low, resonant chord that seemed to vibrate through every stone. Eli stood at the front of the crowd, eyes closed, and listened. Within that note, faint but unmistakable, he heard her voice again, calm, steady, eternal. Remember what was given. Protect what can still be loved. He looked up at the sky, where the clouds had parted to reveal the cold brilliance of the stars, and felt the quiet ache of wonder that had once moved a queen to question her own power. And in that stillness, with a child's hand in his and a world reborn around him, Eli understood what humanity had truly given the galaxy. Not domination, not conquest, just the relentless, foolish courage to love what might break them. The same courage that had made an alien queen pause and a soldier stay when logic said to run. The kind of courage that could outlast empires and rewrite worlds.